Welcome to the LexisNexis Evolving IP podcast, and today's episode, Innovation Crossroads. I'm Nigel Schweitzer, and I'm joined by the host of this podcast series, Francesca Lavoie. Hi, Frankie.
Hi, Nigel. Nice to see you on the new podcast.
We're excited to welcome Olivia Koentjoro, Head of Global Legal Data Analytics at Applied Materials. This is a truly international podcast episode. Welcome, Olivia.
Hi.
I said truly international because we have three countries, all beginning with S: Scotland with Frankie, Singapore, you, Olivia, and I'm in Sweden. Now, in case you think that Friday isn't a day for trivia, which is when we're recording it, both Scotland and Singapore have the same population of 5.5 million, and Scotland is around 110 times bigger. Sweden has twice the population of Scotland and is 5 times its size. Happy with that?
I love a bit of analytics.
Olivia, thank you so much for joining us and being our first guest here. Maybe you can give us a little bit of background about yourself and your education and career for our listeners.
First of all, let me say that it is an honor to be invited to be part of this podcast. So to briefly introduce my career, I initially followed a traditional scientific academic pathway, gaining my PhD in chemistry, followed by a post as a research officer in the UK. I then moved into the IP regulatory space as a patent examiner in both Canada and in Singapore. I joined Applied Materials in 2015 as an IP analyst. For those that don't know Applied Materials, we are a semiconductor equipment company where virtually every chip produced in the world has passed through one of our machines at some point. At Applied Materials, we maintain a portfolio of 19,000 active patents. My role as the head of global legal data analytics focuses on how to use legal data, particularly IP data, both internally, that's our own internal organizational data, and external public information to gain actionable insights to support the business and management in decision making. I work to enable organizational efficiency to transform the business of law through data science, artificial intelligence, and advanced analytics.
I'm delighted that we're going to be able to get into some of those areas in terms of how your team is pivotal to the big business. But I just did want to highlight one thing. You don't have a legal background, do you, in terms of the role that you do?
No, so I'm not an attorney. My background is technical, and kind of the legal crossover, if you will, is the regulatory field. So of course that touches on some of the legal aspects in prosecution.
I just wanted to point that out now because I think for some of our listeners, the team that you're leading, what we're going to talk about, I think is really interesting to know. You don't necessarily have to have a legal background to do that. Maybe we can move on. I'd like to focus in on how IP can bring value to the business.
For me, IP sits at the intersection of business, technology, and legal. My team is responsible for transforming IP-related data into commercial intelligence to support data-driven business decisions and strategies. Data in itself is merely factual, and without context has very little value. I already threw out a data point at you. Applied Materials has an active portfolio of over 19,000 patents. That sounds great, but what does it actually mean? How are we doing compared to our competitors? Do we have an adequate portfolio to cover our suite of products? Are we protecting the right things? Data alone cannot tell you any of this. So you need to overlay business information onto the data to give it its context, and this is where analytics comes in, to transform the IP data into commercial intelligence. Your stakeholders will come at you with their biggest pain point. For each project, you need to identify the right metric that aligns to the business objective. Once you do this, you can then determine the specific data and analytics methods required to track and analyze the metrics effectively. Only then can you be embedded as a full business partner. And in order to actually drive the decision-making in the company or support the decision-making in the company, you have to be fully embedded as a business partner. For example, with regards to portfolio management, one business concern might be related to whether or not new innovations in the organizations are sufficiently protected. For this, we perform regular analytics to monitor the level of ideation, conversion to filing, as well as the amount of translations to foreign filings. If, on the other hand, the business concern relates to whether or not your portfolio is managed efficiently, we would look at benchmarking our portfolio against similar companies in the industry, monitoring our level of filing and abandonment, as well as looking at external competitive data, such as citations, to make smart pruning decisions for our portfolio. It may not be so obvious, but there's actually a lot of innovation needed to deliver IP analytics in a way that brings value to the business. Sometimes this means experimenting with different analytical methods and new tools to develop new methodology. You have to be willing to have some missteps. Sometimes the data or methods that are needed to answer the business questions doesn't exist today. And this is when you have to work together with your stakeholders to get them as far as possible to the answers to the questions, given the existing limitation. I also think that one shouldn't just think about IP data just in relation to the information contained in the patents, such as assignees, filing dates, classifications. I think context can come in the relationship between IP data and other data, such as IP spend, R&D spend, revenue, headcount. We did a project where we were asked to evaluate how innovative our engineering workforce was by tenure and how fast innovation takes to ramp for new hires. This was due to the post-pandemic change in our workforce demographic. The results from this project supported development of a tenure-specific learning and development framework for our engineering workforce. Another example is where we've been involved in developing a marketing story for one of our products by articulating how it is actually technically differentiated from other market offerings based on competitive intelligence.
And Olivia, can I just ask you on that example from marketing? Because it seems like there's definitely an element of you pushing information out there, but also the pull in terms of more of the requests coming through, and even that piece around engineers after COVID. Was that more of a pull or was it more of a push?
That was more of a pull, but at the same time, you have to have this methodology development ready. So there were other things that we were doing in the pipeline that actually, in a sense, we could pull out the bag to apply it to these cases. If you don't constantly do methodology development, then your baseline capabilities sit at a certain level.
I'm just keen to pull in Nigel here, because I think it's so great to hear that we're talking about a crossroads. It's not just a crossroads of different teams, but it's almost like a crossroads of data that enable you to have that unique insight into where the business should go. I mean, Nigel, I don't think we see this often enough, do we, in terms of organizations?
No, I think Olivia is the poster child for how it should be done well. And I'm not just saying that because in applied materials, you are a center of excellence. But this word crossroads says it all to me. I mean, the idea that patents should only be regarded as a legal right and the exclusive domain of patent attorneys that can consider how they might be enforced, that's just a bad reputation. We've talked about that on a number of times. Patent literature is the largest library of scientific information in the world. Let it perform that function. And the thing I really enjoyed, Olivia, it doesn't necessarily tell the whole story. You've got to, number one, combine it with other information, as Olivia catalogued, and then you've got to be able to communicate. That's the skill. I think if I were to give Olivia a superpower to her and her team, and we've been delighted to work with Applied Materials over the years, it's the power of communication. It's storytelling. That's human. That isn't data and it isn't machine learning. It's human.
Olivia, has it always been like that?
Oh, of course not. Sometimes it is a long journey to get there, to get your stakeholders to understand what you do. And even today, it's still a journey of communication and marketing. As we onboard new capabilities, then you do have to refresh that communication with your stakeholders so that they also understand what the new capabilities are. And I think later on, probably we'll touch on AI because it's such a hot topic. But as we onboard that AI capability, we also need to let our stakeholders know where we are in that journey.
So it never ends, it's constantly going.
This is what I mean by saying that it's actually quite innovative, which is not necessarily immediately obvious.
You mentioned that focus on almost the positive side of bringing value from IP to the business around the opportunity it can create. Could you maybe talk a little bit about that? Because I think that's not a word we often hear.
I think for me, it's about the data, right? So the data can give you a lot of things. If your management understands what the data is trying to tell you, they can make the best informed decision. And that helps them understand what the opportunities are. And of course, what are the risks? There's no getting away from that. But it does help them understand the limitations of, say, a product or a business model. And also, in order to pivot, if necessary, to actually capture more growth, more gain, and more opportunity. But without data behind it, your information is quite limited. And what you can and can't do, in a sense, is also quite limited. So that's, I think, for us, a way to expand the opportunity portion. Yes, of course, if we come upon the risk portion, we will describe that. It is about making the best informed decision as possible. I do think that the more data you have, available, it helps you to understand your opportunities better.
Nigel, I'd quite like to get your views on that, because is it almost part of an evolution where you're looking at IP as potentially an area to create or enhance opportunities for the business rather than just focusing on protecting yourselves?
Profit is revenue minus cost. I don't want to turn this into a business lesson. So it's not shame to go and consider the negatives associated with decisions. Business people have every day a range of choices. Olivia sounds like she's trying to go and help them make the best choice, which frankly is the same as saying avoid the worst choice.
Olivia, you must get competing interests, I think, within an organization, whether you have a finance team who's obviously quite focused on cost versus an engineer who wants to get busy and protect all their innovations and keep going. How do you balance that?
Yeah, and especially like to go back to kind of the communication part of it, right? There's actually a lot of nuances in IP and patents that non-IP functions may not fully appreciate. I think one of the jobs of the IP analytics professional is to frame the IP-centric data and analytics in a language that they understand, whether it's finance or technology or risk. So I think in our presentation to your CFO, we're not going to talk in granular detail about the technology. Rather, we're going to frame the value proposition for our patent portfolio in terms of revenue risk. That's a language that he would understand to address the question whether or not our portfolio is right sized to support our revenue, if it's adequately geared to mitigate our risk. But if you're talking to the general manager of a business, the discussion will center around how the IP portfolio is benchmarked against our competitor on a product level, whether or not it enables our technology roadmap and protects our differentiators. And like you said, right, if you're discussing with an engineer, that's usually at this granular technology level. You do the deep dives into the technical solutions to the high value problem. Actually, for the IP analytics professional, you have to have this T-shaped skill where you have to have deep technical and IP knowledge, but you also have to have the ability to communicate both vertically and horizontally across the organization. Because I think Nigel touched on this. The real value in analytics comes when you can craft that narrative by leveraging the data analysis and visualization to contextualize your data and then present it to your stakeholders.
Thank you, Olivia. It's fantastic that you're able to deliver this to the business, but there still must be some challenges there that you have to face.
Yeah, of course. The tendency for people to work with us is that they don't quite know how our interaction model should be. For example, the lawyers are used to a more traditional approach from their law firm background. The business has a misunderstanding that the IP analytics teams are lawyers, as we've already corrected. There is some confusion about how to interact with us and navigate that. There's definitely those challenges, even just on an organizational level. I would say that we can be placed in many different organizations, and how we perform our function sometimes is impacted by that. So if you're placed in a vertical, then they will see you as just that vertical, and that's how they interact with you. Whereas if you're placed in a horizontal, maybe they will interact with you in a different way, but they will perhaps not partner with you as effectively, or they're reluctant to share information with you because of the way you are situated in horizontally across an organization.
I would maybe like us to discuss a challenge that I think is endemic everywhere, which is the challenge around diversity in innovation. Working for Applied Materials, which has innovation at its heart, how can diversity and really trying to spearhead the problems there enable that more?
I think the business case for diversity in the workplace has been made, and it's known that diverse companies outperform their peers, right? But semiconductor gender diversity actually stands at about 20 to 25%. As with all other companies, representation falls to actually under 10% as women progress from individual contributors to managers and above. Applied is no different. But the problems that the industry faces and needs to solve to remain relevant are so complex that actually there's no one individual group that has that ability to solve it. So we actually need the collective input from this diverse set of stakeholders to work together to solve the problems to grow the business. Especially in the high-tech industry, innovation equals your economic potential and your survival, actually. So there's really no choice. You have to create that ecosystem of equality where you give all your best talent equal chance to grow and succeed. But to do this, there has to be this paradigm shift in culture to create this culture of gender inclusivity. In order to increase the underrepresentation of women, particularly in leadership, I think we need to shift the critical markers for leadership and success from confidence to competence. But the challenge here lies in how do you convince individuals who have enjoyed success in an existing organizational structure as the dominant group to adopt the change that's necessary to build this culture of inclusion that delivers the engagement, the trust, the innovation that you want to achieve. And also, DEI, I think, is a journey and it's a constant work in progress where the dominant group actually can shift according to your industry, your region, your demographic. So if you're part of a multi-generational workforce and a multinational organization, you need to understand that each region or demographic has specific challenges. And so that one global strategy may not just work for everything.
I hope we can speak in a not too long a while and things have improved there. Maybe just moving on to another topic, you touched on a little bit around improvements that have been made through AI. How have you found that impacting your team and what you're able to do?
Yeah, AI is such a hot topic these days. The way I see it, we're all asked to do more with less, right? And I think AI is that opportunity that allows us to do less with less. This is not the scary story where AI will replace the analyst or the legal profession's job. I do believe that at the end of the day, AI is just a tool. Those people that do not use AI, they will be replaced by those people that do. So I think everybody has to upskill and they have to start upskilling now. But because it does mean that the use of AI means that we will not be doing legal or IP or analytics in the way it's done today. I do think that it's this huge opportunity. It can reshape the role of the legal and IP professional, but it is actually quite a complex technology and there is a steep learning curve. Everybody thinks it's this easy thing. Quite a few of our stakeholders have bought into the hype and they expect data at a push of a button and they think AI will solve all their problems. Even for companies that have a huge amount of data, there's a lot of work involved in cleaning the data, structuring the data, just to make it accessible for analytics, to actually get you the answers and the results that you want. I do think that companies and management, they need to be given this holistic picture of AI. It should encompass the limitations, the benefits, the opportunities, the risks. So the good, the bad, the ugly of AI, essentially. You shouldn't just tell one side of the story.
And Olivia, this is a question that we hear about a lot. Obviously, Cypher's been on its machine learning journey for a decade, but we seem to be at a different point now. A decade ago, it was like, no, Boolean search, couldn't let go. And now, as you say, ChatGPT or some of the other large language models come out and it's like, why haven't you done more yesterday? How are you actually communicating to the business? You're on it, but you're cautious. It's this balance. How do you communicate that challenge?
Analytics isn't a one-size-fits-all solution, right? So I already kind of touched on it. Even in a traditional model, whether it's Boolean or otherwise, you need to be clear on the use case, the objective, and what insights you expect from the data. In that respect, AI is no different. But at the same time, because it's use case-based, it means you can start small and take it one step at a time. This is especially good if you have actually limited resources because you can work on that focused project. You can deliver a quick win and have good demonstrated value. This iterative approach allows you to learn and adjust as you go, gradually expanding your data and analytics capability over time. In the same way our traditional model worked, in the fact that you had to demonstrate value, gain customer trust, and then be able to deliver effectively, I don't see it as any different with having AI on board. You have to do the same steps. It's just with a different tool and a different ability to deliver.
So Olivia, I think we've almost come to the end of our time together. So what I'd really like to hear from you is what would be your key takeaway for our listeners?
If it's a one-liner, is that IP is a business tool. I would obviously love to have the total integration of analytics into the business and innovation. But the challenge there is how do you deliver value and commercial intelligence in a way that resonates with the business, therefore enhances the decision-making process. So this involves analyzing the IP data with the context around the business objectives, identifying metrics that align with the organizational needs, and utilizing innovative analytics and the latest technology to derive those actionable insights and ultimately communicate the insights in the language of the business.
Thanks, Olivia. This is a fascinating conversation. The starting point that Applied Materials is involved in the production of virtually every new chip and advanced display in the world puts your organization's effort into just such a macro context. But your story is just so instructive. The insights that your team extract from patent data inform the business, not on whether to file for more patents, but to shape the innovation and technology strategy of the group. This takes patents away from simply being a legal right to a source of intelligence around who's doing what and how. Applied Materials have boosted this capability by harnessing the very best of AI and machine learning to put legal analytics at the crossroads of business, technology, and the law. But don't be misled into thinking that it's for technology that adds the value. The power is in the storytelling. That's why Olivia can never be replaced by machines. Storytelling is uniquely human, and long may that continue. Thank you, Olivia, for the conversation. We're delighted to partner with Applied Materials as you continue to add value to the innovation that is vital to your continued success.
Thank you, Olivia. Thank you for tuning into the LexisNexis Evolving IP podcast series. Please continue the conversation on social and share your thoughts about today's episode on the Innovation Crossroads.